Um, Thank you very much for coming tonight. Just want to say a few things before we start. We usually don't touch the controversial stuff, and the Klan and their activities in this area have always interested me. And way back in the 1980s, I tried to make it a point to interview people who were directly involved in some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. And they have since passed on, and some of them sent me letters, and I have those, so some of the stuff I talk about will be from firsthand accounts, but also some of the other stuff is strictly from the newspapers. So, because it's one of these topics that can bring about some ill feelings, many times the paper didn't cover it, or it's misinterpreted, whatever. So tonight you're going to see probably a few familiar names. This is happened 100 years ago, so nobody is alive today who was directly involved in any of this stuff that I'm talking about tonight. Maybe a grandfather or two might have been, I don't know. And so I'll do the best I can. I'm not an expert in the Klan, but it always fascinated me, and we'll kind of see how it goes, all right? And then I hope right near the end we're going to hear from any one of you who might have a story from your past. And I don't mean with the Klan, but a grandfather who told you something or whatever. I should say, just for kicks, that we were going to have door prizes tonight, but Bed Bath & Beyond didn't come through for us. Thank you. That's good. Hi, Paul. All right, here we go. Obviously, the sign, the symbol of the Ku Klux Klan was the burning cross. And they were famous for it. And these little articles spread around here are really all local articles, because we had burning crosses all over town in the mid-1920s. They always pick their spots very, very carefully. You'll see one here, 2 crosses burned, one on Cemetery Hill. That would be the back of Woodlawn Cemetery. In fact, that's why this picture is here. It's a little out of focus. It was taken in front of this building, but it was right there. So it would be at the very end of Church Street, and all of a sudden you look up and there it is. So all of Cedar Hill, all of downtown could see these things. In Lancaster, Stump Hill, of course, Mount View Drive and all that area, that had burning crosses. Cedar Hill was, they had one above the Nashua River on Grove Street, at the end of Grove, Rattlesnake Ledge, right up there. That was probably for the Acre and Holy Rosary Church and people like that. All of this was to, create, obviously, an emotion, some anxiety, some stress, some concern. And it was really quite the thing. Most of what you're going to see tonight are really just headlines more than anything else. And the reason being, of course, that we, as I said, people don't have pictures of Grandpa trying on his KKK hood or something. There's no homemade pictures like that. One of the stories that I learned firsthand came from Percy Robinson. I don't know if you remember Percy. But many, many years ago when I talked to him, he told me he was 15 years old. It was his first day on the job at the carpet mill, which is Nitro, and he was told to deliver it was a big can of gasoline, a bunch of rags, some wood, some iron pipes behind the mill that is now turning into residences on Main Street across from Dunkin' Donuts in there. So he did. He was 15 years old, didn't even have a license, but he drove a truck there to the spot. And he left all of that, didn't know what it meant. He just was doing what he was told to do. And of course, the next day, came the headline about a fiery cross burned on Cemetery Hill, and he realized he was the one who did it. So it was all kind of an undercurrent. But then again, this is Clinton. And it was Clinton in 1925 too. So everybody kind of knew what side you were on, really. So why did the Klan start in New England? A quick little history. In Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont especially, we had an influx of French Canadians coming down. And most of them were Catholics, and that was created a problem. And I hate to say it, but it's the same argument that we're hearing today, all right? These people are coming in. They're not really Americans. They're taking our jobs. They speak funny, things like that. It's almost the same argument. In Massachusetts, remember, there were very few African Americans around here. The Klan was interested in targeting Catholics and Jews. And that's why they came really here to Clinton, all right? We had plenty of Catholics and some Jewish people. There was, of course, the increased political power for the Irish. The Irish was getting more and more powerful. David I. Walsh, 10 years before a lot of this. People like that. My dad always said, I guess it was a joke, but he'd always say, everybody has a hall. The Polish have the PAV, the Italians have the ITAM hall, and the Irish have the town hall. So everybody had a hall, apparently. But Rhode Island and Connecticut, it was the Italians that seemed to be the target for whatever the reason. And the next thing down might tell you that Sacco and Vanzetti was a Massachusetts case, right? But I think it was on the border of Massachusetts and Connecticut. And again, I should say that it happens to me too when I read the paper and suddenly some illegal has come in and committed some terrible crime. Right away, of course, everybody of that color, of that nationality, they're all terrible, they're all bad. And I think Sacco and Vanzetti probably didn't help the Italians' cause in New England at all at that point. And then, of course, white Anglo-Protestants felt that they were losing control. Almost every town in this area was settled by Protestants, all right? The Bigelows were Protestant. They allowed these churches to be built, the Unitarians, the Baptists, the Congregationalists, all of them. And then they ultimately let the Catholics have their plot of land, St. John's Church. And then, of course, a guy by the name of Al Smith became a national kind of celebrity. He was a Catholic. He ran for president. We didn't elect our first president till another, 35, 40 years later. But that was another thing that unsettled a lot of we'll call it the ruling class. This didn't help either. It was one of the first major films ever made, 1915, The Birth of a Nation. And it was originally called The Klansman, and it was based on a book by, I'm not sure the author, but anyway, Klansman spelled with a C. And that was kind of an inspiration. It was like a romanticized look at the South back in the old days. And it really kind of glorified the Klan and what the Klan meant. And again, the Klan down south, it was not the same Klan. It's the same group, but totally different mission, I guess you'd say, than what happened down south during Reconstruction. So Worcester, Mass. became kind of the center of the Klan. It really did. It was actually the Klan center of New England was Worcester. And in 1923, they had this huge Klan convention in, I think it was Worcester Memorial Auditorium. In 1924, it was, I think they called it the Worcester Fairgrounds. It was held. And in 24, I think they recruited something like 1,500 people to join the Klan at this one event in Worcester. Now, Klan rallies were held all over central Massachusetts, in these towns especially, and all of these are in the local newspapers. There used to be an article called Worcester County, and almost always, every I think it was once or twice a week in the item, and it would almost always have a KKK article about something that they did here and there. In Charlton, for instance, they lit a burning cross right across the street from St. Joseph's Church during its annual lawn party. In Princeton, 700 Klanners met in an open field. In Athol, they had a fiery cross. In Boylston, another one. 700 Klanners clashed with 75 anti-Klanners. That was in Millbury. And some of the anti-Klanners pulled their hoods off, which was a big to-do at the time. And in West Boylston, there was a huge Klan meeting on Route 140. So they were all over the place. It wasn't just happening here, that's for sure. But now locally, it's kind of interesting that locally, Berlin had Klan meetings every Tuesday night, kind of like the Rotary Club or something. I mean, I can say that, I'm president. But no, I mean, it was a normal, regular thing. And so you can see in this article that came from the item, I forgot what they said, but officials estimated that there were at least, I think it says 1,500 men in attendance. But a lot of these Klan rallies had women and children too. They were, especially in northern New England, a Klan was like, I mean, they had barbecues, they had outings, they had fundraisers. They were almost very, very well accepted in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont especially. But again, you know, I don't want to turn this into Protestant versus Catholics, but that's kind of how this all really developed. It really did. So at first, the anti-Klanners fought back. And again, I think I can say that the Catholics fought back, but in a different way. If you read this, it's kind of silly that there was a big meeting in Westboro, and the Klan's coming in from all over Central Mass. And so what do the Catholics do? They knock down all the signs for the directions so that the Klan can't find where the heck the meeting is, you know. So that's innocent, silly, you know, fun, I guess you'd say. I don't know. But it got worse very quickly. So this came from the item. This was the first official Klan riot in Lancaster on Ballard Hill, right on Route 117. This again came right out of the item. State constables means the state police. The state police always seemed to be called in because the locals really had trouble handling all this going on. And this is just from this big, huge article. I try to pick out some of the highlights, I guess you'd say. So the meeting was held in Charles Shoemaker Jr.'s field on Ballard Hill, which I think is still there today. When you go to the top of the hill on the right, there's like walled-in pastures. And that's the type of place they always met. Their outdoor meetings always seemed to be in a walled-in area with one small gate. And that was for a reason. It ended up being a 9-hour standoff because most of the troublemakers were from Clinton. They were the Catholic guys from Clinton. And they were looking to, looking for some action too, just like the Klanners were. So when you have this big, huge field filled with Klan people, and they were having speakers and all the stuff that they do, the anti-Klan people would just wait at the gate. They weren't allowed to go in because you always had these hooded guards at the gate letting in just Klan people. But the Catholic guys, armed usually with stones, rocks and stones, would try to get in, and the cops would have to stop them. But sooner or later, the meeting would have to end, and the Klan would have to come out that entrance, and the anti-Klanners were just sitting there waiting for them. And they always seemed to end that way. So in this case, the Klanners tried to get through, at least anti-Klanners tried to get through that main gate at least twice. It didn't work. Shots rang out at midnight. The shoemaker house and barn were damaged by rocks. Then someone got hurt. A guy by the name of Roy Grover got injured, and they had to call an ambulance, which really added to all this crazy confusion. And this is right on Route 117 on Ballard Hill. So you can imagine if you were just going by with your family, just going someplace, or coming home from someplace, more than likely your windshield was going to get smashed anyway. That was part of the problem. A lot of innocent people got hurt, or at least their vehicles damaged, their property damaged. So some of the Klanners were so afraid that they just left their cars in the field and escaped in the back through the woods. They were searched for weapons. The state police kind of started a new thing that at the very least, if they're going to throw rocks, let them throw rocks at each other, but not pull guns. And so they decided to really check for that. And an eyewitness there did say they could see a lot of the Klan people with their hands up in the air and getting patted down by state police. So they knew that they were checking for weapons. So finally the police, after 9 hours, decided to escort the Klan cars out of the field. And that's when all hell broke loose with rocks and stones and everything else. So the anti-Klanners were writing down the license plates. That's what they did too. They were famous for that. So you'd see the cars go by and they'd write down the plate because that meant we'll see you later sometime. We'll follow up, you know. And the Klan people, in order to avoid that, many times they'd either cover their back plate with their handkerchief or they'd spread mud all over their plate so you couldn't read it, so you didn't know, no one could tell who you were. F.A. Collins and son Orrin were followed back to their Main Street home where a violent confrontation took place. And I interviewed Olive Collins many, many years ago. She's long passed. And Orrin's grandson, where is he? Right there. Orrin, am I right? Orrin's grandson is here tonight. So thank you for coming, and please correct me if I say something wrong. All right, so they were coming back from this as spectators. I do not believe that they were Klan members, but the Klan always tried to recruit. They'd invite you, come on out to a meeting, see what we do, blah, blah, blah. So these guys on Main Street went by, father and son, they went out to see what they were doing. Olive told me many years ago that she said they were beaten up on the front porch of their house on Main Street in Clinton by Klanners. But I have a feeling after all of this research that it was the bad boys from Clinton that followed them back and assumed right away, well, these guys are got to be in the Klan. So there was a violent confrontation. The father ran across the street to the mill to try to get some help. And I believe Olive said I thought she said she saw some of it. She was a little girl, I think. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, afterwards, the field was searched. They found some weapons, but really just 2 razors, lots of clubs, buckets of stones. That's how both sides prepared. They really did. They would load up their cars with rocks. And that seemed to be the weapons of choice for Klan people and anti-Klanners. Thank God everybody didn't have a gun back in those days, because there would have been some serious problems. The very next day, Lancaster officials were called to the State House to meet with the governor, because all of this stuff was getting carried away. And 2 anti-Klanners, William O'Toole, and we have one of his relatives here too. Where is she? Jean, our president. And he was shot. Those shots that rang out, he got bird shot or something in the back of his head. And those are about the only 2 anti-Klanners that I ever heard of that were arrested. Most of the anti-Klanners were never arrested. Only the Klanners were. But William O'Toole and Joseph Flynn, both from Clinton, were arrested by Lancaster police. And then a doctor had to tend to William O'Toole because the back of his head was bleeding profusely. The other side are the victims of the Lancaster Ballard Hill riot. And so again, there's the Officer Peter Sonia had an inch and a half cut on his forehead from a rock that he got. And Roy Glover was the man that I think it was collarbone broken by rocks. That was why the ambulance was called. William O'Toole was a wound on the back of the head. Orrin Collins, who again lived on Main Street, he was injured, beaten up by, they say, 6 guys in a car, headed to Clinton, and they even got the license plate, but nothing ever happened about it. And then Edward Beard from Leominster treated for shot wounds too. So this is the Collins house on Main Street, and that front porch was open then, and they were coming back from Ballard Hill, which is the same street, Main Street, 117, and that's where these anti-Klanners caught up with them, and again, nothing that serious as far as, obviously it was an assault, but nothing permanent, no damage, no shotguns, anything like that. So after all of this, especially the shots that rang out, that's when they set this new policy that said, you know what we're going to do? Every time there's a Klan meeting, we're going to check them for weapons. And if they have a license to carry, we're going to take the gun anyway. And the next day they can come to the station and get it themselves. If they don't have a license to carry, we're arresting them and hauling them into jail immediately. And they did the same thing with the anti-Klanners, all right? So it didn't matter if you were legally carrying, you weren't going to carry it at one of these meetings. So I had never heard of this until I did my more recent research, but on May 3rd, 1925, Berlin had its own riot. And wasn't as serious perhaps as others, but it was serious nonetheless. And here's what happened in Berlin. It was held on Brewer Farm, Sawyer Hill Road, which I think is near, is it Berlin Farms? You know, Berlin Orchards, right on Route 62. I think it's probably the big farm. Yep. And 275 Klanners fought about 100 anti-Klanners, and the anti-Klanners, of course, were from Clinton and Hudson. Emerson Wheeler was injured in the battle. He was the constable or chief of police, whatever. The meeting was well publicized through signs on mill gates and cards under milk bottles. That was one of the biggest things the Klan did. That was one of the ways that they got their message around, because the Klanners were everywhere. And so when they delivered milk in the morning to their various customers, they would slip under the milk bottle, like, don't forget the meeting tonight at, whatever. And so, and they posted, it was regular posters too. They just put them on mill gates and things like that. I think a lot of the people who worked in the mills were probably Klan people. That's a generalized statement, obviously. But again, some of the things the Klan did, and you start to really think about today and what's going on. The Klan raised the United States flag. They sung gospel songs. They had speakers. They felt that they were, that we are the true Americans, and these people coming in, these immigrants, these people who don't speak our language, who don't look like us, they don't belong here. We have to make life miserable for them. And they tried. Police told the Klan not to go home through Clinton. Everybody knew Clinton was a stronghold for Catholics. A place like Berlin, think about Berlin, where they had all the meetings. Berlin had its first Catholic church built in, I think, 1959, all right? We had Catholics in this town in 1840, right? So Berlin, nothing against my Berlin friends, but they were Protestant, a farming community, very conservative. Not too many Catholics, I would think, would settle there. I don't think any Jewish folks would settle there either. And then we had Clinton, that was the stronghold. So then it was kind of they said total confusion, because when the cops finally got them out of the field, they told them you can't go 62 back toward Clinton. So, they went up the hill and over to, I think it's Pleasant Street and all these places in Berlin to try to get the heck away from Clinton. But the Clinton guys went rushing, to try to go to those intersections so they would meet them with a hail of stones, of course, and rocks and all kinds of stuff. And once again, no arrests were made at all. Well, here's another riot. This one was in Sterling on Route 62. I think somewhere between the Clinton line and probably like Sterling Ice Cream Bar. And there are farms out that way. Here's another one, again, 400 Kluxers, I guess they call them, and 200 opponents. And here we go, the same thing. It was held in Henry Godfrey's Field, 300 to 400 Klansmen, the hooded guards at the gate, same as always. And then as the Klan left the field, that's when the number of anti-Klanners, again from Clinton, started hurling rocks. They called for state police backup. For some reason, even on Main Street, they figured that it's Sterling, so they're going to have to go through Clinton somehow, somewhere. So all of the anti-Klanners would try to go to any major intersection loaded with rocks to see, and I don't know how they'd know, but sometimes they didn't, but they just, destroyed the cars anyway. But that's what they did. They tried to head them off at the pass, so to speak. The Klan, though, decided not to come through Clinton. That was a good idea. But again, several innocent travelers had damage to their cars, rocks through windshield and things like that. And again, no arrests were made. So obviously, there's a lot of Catholics around who were extremely concerned. They were very, very worried about what was going on, what was happening. They were all in danger, really. They didn't know for what purpose. They didn't know when anything would happen. But if you were a Catholic in Clinton in 1925, you really had better worry a little bit and be a little careful about where you were going and what you were doing. So they did. Father John Bell was the pastor of St. John's. He spoke about it to the people, to the Catholics who went to the Mass that weekend. He tried to tell them that, we have to respect the laws. You should not be fighting back or anything like that, which priests are apt to say, but doesn't always work, does it? But then it really got carried away. The Klan, again, targeted Catholic property. So Leominster had $100,000 damage to St. Cecilia's school. That was in Leominster. They tried to burn it down. They did burn it down. And again, I believe that church was founded by French Canadians. So there's the same thing again and again. Now, the very next day in Shirley, somebody tried to burn down a convent and classrooms at St. Anthony's convent school. And then there was one more, I think St. Anne's in Worcester. They found, gasoline and rags in the back of the church, but they hadn't gotten around to lighting things up yet. So they were targeting Catholic churches, all over central Massachusetts. But it's funny because I think maybe, and I could be wrong on this, but I think there were still people back in the 20s that thought Catholic churches, like the basement of Catholic churches, were armories. And that's where the Catholics were gathering guns and ammunition for like the religious wars that were going to take place, that kind of thing. That was a common belief, at least earlier than the 20s, that's what the Catholics are doing. They're storing ammunition for the ultimate fight. So, pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, crazy.
Yes. So here's the Clinton Klan riot. There's a lot to say about that one. The pictures on the right are where it happened, right in my old neighborhood. Probably from about Kilmurray Street on the Acre to about I'd say the junction of Oak and Chase. So that's the Acre Club right there. All happened right around there. That's the, yeah, there you go. Lock your doors. No. So, again, look at it, night of wild disorder reigns in Clinton. And so the story, and there's a lot to it really, is that here's some details anyway. Around 11 o'clock, Klan didn't worry about time. They didn't start their meetings till late. They didn't get out till late. So 11 o'clock, there was a big Klan meeting in Berlin, again, where most of the Klan meetings were. And there was a dozen state police that had been on hand for the meeting, just in case of trouble or whatever. Surprisingly enough, there wasn't trouble in Berlin for a change. But for whatever the reason, they had a little meeting, the Klan leaders and the staties, and the Klan decided that, you know what, we're going to go right through Clinton. We're not going to go around Clinton. We're tired of that. We're going to go right through Clinton. Now, if you know your roads, if you follow 62, they could have easily gone over Willow Road, and some of them, of course, were from Worcester. They would have been gone. Instead, they decided to go right down Berlin Street. And they knew what they were doing. They were ready. They were armed, at least with rocks or whatever. I don't know if they knew that the Acre boys were lying in wait, but many were. So somewhere between, anyway, yes, and talk about a parade, all right? The state police, I think, were in 3 or 4 cars, all right? Behind them, 100 cars, led by 3 open trucks, with these hooded Klansmen hanging out of all of them in the back and everything else. So, I mean, this was literally a parade, and, this was a big deal. And so somewhere between Kilmurray and Oak Street, they met about 400 or 500 anti-Klanners. And police tried to get the cars out of there and bring them down Cameron Hill and then take a left. A lot of them were Worcester bound. So they could have easily gone Willow Road and taken a left, gone Route 70 and gone home. But they decided they wanted this show of power. So the cops tried to get them down to Cameron Hill where they could take a left up past the dam. It really didn't work. And the fighting was totally out of control. You're talking about 400 anti-Klanners that were hiding in bushes, behind hedges, behind fences, baseball bats, rubber hoses, iron pipes, limbs from trees. And that's just not the Catholic boys. That was, the Klan had them too. It was an absolute mob scene. It was a riot, absolute riot. So they called all the local police in, even the day shift cops, they called them in to try to help out. There was a car belonging to some man from Newton, Mass. They decided to overturn it on Oak Street. They pulled out everything. It was totally, absolutely destroyed. And one of the rumors says that they were going to torch it, and then some anti-Klan member said, no, wait a minute, if you torch it, they're going to total it, and then the guy's going to have insurance. So let's not torch it. So just, so anyway, in other words, here's your car, and it doesn't work anymore, and it couldn't possibly work. They pulled electric wires out and everything. And this is what they found later on. Over 100 clubs, bats, rubber hoses, iron pipes littered the streets from Kilmurray all the way really down to the police station. And 37 people were arrested. And surprisingly enough, it was only Klansmen that were arrested. Yeah, I know. Weird, huh? So here's more of this is what happened at the police station. We had 37 Klanners there. 5 had more charges than the others. Again, most of these charges, I don't know if I have that. I have that coming up. So anyway, bail was set for $100 for each one, $300 for those 5 others that had some weapons charges too. State police were there, of course, and they were at the front door of the Clinton Police Station, which, of course, is on Mechanic Street, the Icon Museum now, downstairs. So they were stationed right there. They were outside on Mechanic Street. They were on the other side on Union. And so some who came to bail out their friends were locked up themselves. That happened. Chief Kittredge ordered an Essex coach to the station, belonged to somebody named Merle Bogert. I think he was from Southborough. But that vehicle was parked right in front of the police station, and that was torched by the Catholic guys. So there they are right there, and that was a bone of contention, needless to say, that our car would be stripped, wires pulled out, windows busted, and then torched in front of the police station. But it happened. It happened here. Some of those arrested had copies of a Klan newspaper. I think it was a newspaper that it was printed in Washington, D.C., and they had it on them. And I assume they immediately guessed that they were Klanners then. Most of the charges were only 2 minor charges. Almost all of these people, the only thing they could get them on, you can't arrest somebody for being a Klan member, just like you can't arrest them for being a communist or a Republican or anything else, right? So the charges were disturbing the peace and parading without a permit. Those were basically the 2 ways that they got these guys. That's what they did. And again, another 5, though, had more serious things. So overall, 80 complaints were sworn out by Chief Kittredge, who, if you haven't figured it out by now, was a Catholic. So this is part that I really didn't want to show you. It's public information. It was in the newspapers. I don't know what else to say. So if you see a familiar name, some of them are from Clinton. Again, it was 100 years ago. If you see somebody that you're related to, it doesn't mean you feel the same way that they felt in 1925. I have a couple of notes on some of the names. If I go down the left side first, every one of these guys was a Klansman. Russ, that Herbert Russ from Worcester, he had a possession of a club. So when he was arrested, he had a club in his hand, so that meant an extra charge. White was an interesting guy. William White, he was from Sterling. They asked him later on, after this was all over with, were the cops thorough? And he said, yeah, they sure were, because they had to claim my brand new false teeth, and they wouldn't put me in a cell until I gave them my false teeth. So the cops were pretty thorough, I guess. Chipman was a Clinton guy, William Chipman, 95 Forest Street. He was the very last one arrested. He was not arrested during the riot. He came in the next morning. He pulled up, and somebody there said, I think he was in the crowd, and standing there, because this brought all kinds of people out, all around the courthouse, all around the police station. And somebody pointed him out and said, he was there last night. And they grabbed him and they brought him in. They arrested him then. He was the very last one arrested. Tuttle was waiting in a car outside the station and was brought in and arrested. There's a Stewart guy. Where did I leave off? Fred Stewart from Sterling was waiting in his car and he got pulled out. Morris claims he wasn't even in the Klan parade, but came back looking for Klan friends and was arrested. Alfred Smith, right down here, 189 Water Street. The Smiths were Klan members, no doubt about it. 2 brothers were in on this thing. Alfred Smith was arrested when he came to bail out his brother, who's on the other side there. We're getting to him. Bogert was, where is he, on the other side there? Anyway, Bogert was the guy whose car got stripped, and he got arrested for no license and registration. Which is pretty funny when you think about it, because he wasn't driving anywhere. His car was done. He was all through. Last guy here, I got to tell you a quick story. This Norman Sawyer, 22 years old, from Sterling. I told you in the I think it was the 80s, I was fascinated by this story, and I thought the best way to learn about it would be to talk to people who were there. And, you know, there's enough of old-timers in town that would tell you, oh yeah, that guy, he was there, or this guy was there, or my uncle threw this stone or that stone, whatever. So I found out where he lived, and he was elderly, and right before I was going to call him up, he ended up in a rest home, nursing home, and he won some kind of tremendous award in the town of Sterling. He was honored by the town of Sterling. In fact, they called him Mr. Sterling. That's how popular and well-known he was. He ended up at Oakdale Nursing Home, and I decided to be brave, and I called up and I told him what I wanted. I didn't say I wanted to go talk about the Klan, but I said I want to talk to him about, growing up in Sterling and some of the things he did as a young man, whatever. They told me he was very sharp, tremendous memory. He was going to be, he'd be great. He'd love to talk to you. He loves to talk. Okay, great. Made an appointment to see him a week and a half later, and he dropped dead. So for a while, I did that to about 3 people. So my wife would always say, Terry, if you ever say to somebody, we got to get together, and I'm going to interview you about, like run like hell, because no, yeah, you don't want to be next, definitely not. So what else we have? That's Norman Sawyer. Spencer was waiting in his car in the front of the station. He got hauled in. Parker from Clinton, he's there somewhere. He had a gun in his car, and he's going to pay for that. Bates, there's a John Bates, but I don't think that's not our John Bates, but 63 from Phillipston. But he had possession of a club. And Newton came back to help Klan friends, and he was arrested. And Rice had the most serious charges. He was in possession of a gun and charged with intent to kill. And he was a Clinton boy. And again, altogether, 80 charges were filed against these 37 Klan members. So here's a better look at the Clinton crowd. This is William Chipman. He lived at 95 Forest Street, 20 years old, says counterman. And that's because he and his family owned a high street business. And right around the same time this was happening, as I said, Clinton is Clinton, and it hasn't changed one bit. Everybody knew in 1925 what side of the road you were on. And they knew what you were doing. They knew if you were a member of this or a member of that. So the Catholics got together and basically boycotted the chocolate shop, which was the name of his family's, right down on High Street. I believe it was like roughly where the Clinton Bar and Grill is, all right? And it was family-run business, but it didn't last long, because as soon as all of this came out, every Catholic in town said, we're not stepping into that store, and they went out of business in no time.
What store was it, Terry?
Pastry, chocolates, confectionery. And here's another look at that. There were 2 stores on High Street that were owned by Klansmen, all right? The one on the right might surprise you a little, I don't know. So what happened, though, the difference between Fred Stowers and my friend Mr. Chipman was Chipman wasn't giving an inch. He wasn't denying that he was a member of the Klan, and the Catholics took it out on him and put him out of business because of it. Stowers was a little different. He was a quieter man about it, a good businessman, they said, and basically a nice man. But he was in the Klan. But he saw what was going on with the chocolate shop, so he went and hired Catholic women to be his clerks. And almost every clerk he had in his store was a well-known Catholic. And therefore, that store didn't go out till what? The 60s, 70s? That was a maybe 80s, very well-known store in town. And that was in the bank building. Now it's an empty store, but I think it was I'm going to say 65 High Street. I'm not sure. So here's Earl Parker, 96 Pearl Street. He had a possession of a gun, 25 years old. Almost all of these guys were 20 to 30 years old. And they were really looking for a little excitement, I think. That was the biggest problem with them. And he was a chauffeur. I don't know much else about him. Here's Everett Rice. He lived on the left side of this, the mill building on Grove Street, 19 Grove Street. He was 20 years old. And his charge about trying to kill somebody, he tried to kill 3 Catholic guys. John Joyce, William McMahon, and James Freeman. So he fired at them and didn't hit them, but that's why he was the most serious of all of them as far as charges. Here's Robert Smith, 189 Water Street. It's so funny because when I was a kid, everybody, I think, probably remembered Smith's Store. Anybody remember Smith's Store? It was like the Smiths didn't own it, but that was my first job. I was in the 8th grade, and the store was about the square footage of this stage here, and almost exactly opposite Hammond Street. It was sitting right there in front of the house. Actually, this house is almost on the road. There's a big house in the back, and to the left was this little tiny store that the neighbors all went to, or whatever. She was a nice little old lady in a rocking chair, and you'd come in and she'd get up and get you what you were looking for, or whatever. But that was Mrs. Smith's store. And this was Robert Smith, 26 years old, a merchant. That's the only picture I can find because he probably was the only graduate of Clinton High. I mean, back in those days, you didn't stay in high school long. This is the older brother, Alfred Smith. He's Robert's brother. He was involved in the riot. He was an electrician. And again, 23 years old. Now, he was younger brother, I guess. And again, 189 Water Street. So this, of course, hit the papers immediately. Why was it that that huge riot that involved probably 800 to 1,000 people, why only 37 arrests, and how come every one of them was a Klan member and none of them were anti-Klanners? So one of the big mouths from the state level was this Roy Kimball. He was the state police captain or whatever, and he's the one that they interviewed, and he said a lot of nasty things about the Clinton police and what they did or whatever. And this is how it all started. I'm going to have to read this to you, but Lieutenant Roy Kimball and Captain George Parker on the left, they were the state police, and these were some of their favorite quotes. You know, the state police played no favorites. My men did not know who were Klansmen and who were antis. They arrested all men they caught fighting or causing trouble. If any of the men whom the state police placed under arrest and took to the Clinton police station for booking escaped, then I call it a bad piece of police business on the part of the Clinton police. Did we have a Clinton police? Yes, we do. There she is. All right. Don't tell the chief that I said this. So George Parker, what else? And the state police arrested the troublemakers impartially, of course. And George Parker, I have confidence in my men. That's what the state police always say. And I'm going into the charges and countercharges, but have not reached the bottom of the affair yet. And I don't think they ever did, by the way. So Chief Michael Kittredge, the Catholic, chief of police in Clinton, he had some other things to say. Like, the state police organized and led the Klan parade that ended in the riots in Clinton, which they did. They were told to protect the Klan, or at least, as part of their little parade. The men under arrest who left the station house before being booked walked out right past state patrolmen because they were at the front door. So if these guys just walked out, Clinton cops are saying, I don't know, it's their fault, not ours. The state police took a prisoner from one of my men, but he was released and never booked, which is kind of interesting. Little politics there, perhaps. I have issued summonses for 3 anti-Klansmen who walked out of the station. I have also summoned 7 more alleged Klansmen. So the chief said he was still going after some people that they know were at the riot, but they just didn't happen to come in that night. I love this quote: "The youths of the Acre District were too much for the state police." That's about right. Being a former Acre boy, I just love that. The Acre guys were too much for the cops, period. And the state police knew the Klansmen were armed, but did not disarm them. So, I don't know. Then once again, though, any group, and we all know it today, any group that requests police protection is going to get it. That's the way it is. Doesn't matter if they are not a majority or anything else. They get protected, I guess you'd say. That's how it works. So anyway, it got so bad, the back and forth, the war of words, that the Massachusetts Commissioner of Public Safety had to jump in. And of course, he said this right here: "The state police has never in any way protected or guarded the Klan and never will. This department has never received from the Klan any request for protection, and any such request would merely be referred to the proper local police authorities. The only times that members of the state police have attended meetings of the Klan this year have been when requested specifically to do so by local town officials. This applies to the recent Berlin-Clinton meeting." So they're saying, hey, not our problem, it wasn't our fault, whatever. And this struck me as I was going through the old newspapers, that so much was happening then. I think a lot of it was probably Klan related, but the Klan is not mentioned. There's a mysterious fire in South Lancaster. I love this one on the left. Some bunch of guys come up and beat the living daylights out of the two Smith brothers on Water Street. And so what happens? Mr. Smith says he was on the store piazza at the time. About just what happened, Mr. Smith says he has nothing to say. Because that's what was going on. You got beaten up, you didn't announce it, you didn't run to the police. You all knew, everybody knew who did it and why they did it, and you just expected you're going to get them back next time. You know, that's how it works. So here's another thing that they would love to do. They would run around and pull fire alarms. Now, years ago, some old-timer told me that two Catholic guys, one named Brady and one named Devaney, were the guys that ran around and pulled all the alarms. And I had heard that originally that they pulled the alarms and they expected the Klan would be blamed for it. But I think it was more of a signal. And I think it depended on if the Klan happened to be coming through somewhere, maybe those people would go to that area and pull the box. And that was kind of either a warning or some kind of signal to, hey, come on over Oak and Chase, because that's where they are right now, that kind of thing. So anyway, they, of course, put out a reward for all of these pulling the alarms. So you see the $100 reward. But the article on the right was the one that got to me, because more and more people were starting to stay home. You had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, think about if you're 5 minutes behind a Klan parade coming from Berlin, or going anywhere, and you're just going along with your family, going someplace. Your car's going to be damaged. You could be hurt. Drivers were very fearful of what was going on. They really didn't know what to expect. So there was one legal suit filed. This was some Arthur Hewitt of Westboro, and he claimed a $1,000 action against the town of Clinton. He supposedly was driving well behind the Klan at the Acre riot, and his car got wiped out and he got hurt or whatever. So he decided to file a $1,000 suit against the town of Clinton. And I tried to follow it, and I did. I found it 2 years later that he settled for $125. So he did get something out of it anyway. But violence had really reached its peak in 1925. I think both sides were realizing that that things were getting really crazy, and people were getting hurt, and more and more police were needed, and everything else. So the Klan started to smarten up a little bit, and they started to move their meetings. And some of them, a lot of them ended up being moved to like southern New Hampshire. They would just cross the border where it was a little bit more wilderness and not as busy, and probably less Catholics too, right? So how did it end for the Clinton rioters, those 37 people who did that? Well, only 2 got truly nailed for it, and that was Everett Rice and Earl Parker, and they were on gun charges. Everybody else got dismissed, all gone. They paid their bail and they were gone. They went to court. Again, all Clinton people gathered around the court sessions. I mean, you can imagine this was the biggest thing in town for, in the 1920s. What happened to Chief Kittredge? Chief Kittredge was a great guy. He pretty much stopped the Klan. There was no more Klan nonsense in Clinton after that Acre riot. They say he was very good this was during Prohibition. He did a lot to stop a lot of the illegal traffic of booze. I don't know if that made him popular or not, but whatever. But what happened to Chief Kittredge was politics happened to Chief Kittredge. That's what happened, because back in those days we were still a bipartisan town. So when you ran for school committee, you were the Republican candidate for school committee, or you were the Democratic candidate for the Board of Selectmen. You had to be on one side or the other. And he was hired by 3 selectmen. We had 3 back then. 2 out of 3 were Democrats. And Chief Kittredge was a huge Democrat. He was a leader of the Democratic Party in Clinton. So guess, they put him up as chief. Suddenly, as you can see here, Republicans gain a sweeping victory. So suddenly, I believe all 3 selectmen are now Republicans. And of course, what they would do is they would dismiss most of the police force, because it was all about politics. There was no civil service. So if most of the police officers were put in by a Democratic Board of Selectmen, and the Republicans take over, then it's time to clean house, and we're going to get our buddies in there. That's how it works. Here is a little bit more about Michael Kittredge. He was a Spanish-American War veteran. He was the chairman of the town Democratic Committee. He was a library trustee. He was one of the founding members of the Clinton VFW. He was a water commissioner, and he was even a deputy tax collector. And he's buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. On the left side is he and his wife, and on the same stone, the other side of it, it's way up in the back, is Kramer, which was his in-laws. And I want to tell you something quickly about Kittredge and what a kind of a popular guy he was. Right before the election, it goes to show you Clinton still hasn't changed much when it comes to politics, but right before the election, the Dems, who were in power, were a little bit worried that maybe they weren't going to be in power after the election. So they got together with Kittredge and they demoted him. And they said, "You're not going to be chief anymore. We're going to make you a sergeant." And the reason for that was at the town meeting, they were going to vote, the town of Clinton was going to vote to accept civil service. All right? It had already been defeated 2 or 3 times before that, but they figured that if they demoted him to the ranks of a regular police officer, all right, that he would be protected. And if civil service went through, he would be protected because he's in the regular force. We know that the chief is hired by the Board of Selectmen. So just demote him, put him in the rank and file, and he's probably going to be a cop for the rest of his life. Well, he ended up selling insurance for the Metropolitan Life. That's what he did for most of his time after that, because needless to say, they did that, and then the town of Clinton refused civil service for the 3rd straight time, anyway. So he was quite a guy. He really was. So anyway, the Klan activity here pretty much stopped. And, you know, I don't know if we can claim the Acre Boys did it or not, but certainly that was a major issue there. They pretty much stopped locally after that. Obviously, the Klan continued. Here they are the next year marching on, Washington, D.C. They are still around today. But I think the biggest issue of all was the fact that I do believe the Klan probably underestimated the local Catholics. They really did. I think they thought that all of the Catholics would follow like what Father Bell said at St. John's. You know, basically pray, we'll change the laws, we'll do something legal to stop this craziness, when in essence they didn't realize that the Catholic boys were just going to go beat the hell out of them and constantly, and you know, they meant fire with fire. And I don't think the Klan expected that. They thought it would be all legal means, and it didn't happen that way. So with that, I just want to know if anybody has any questions from their family, stories, grandparents. Anybody tell me a Klan story? That's how I learn stuff. Whether it's true or not. Yes?
Terry, my father was 6 years old when that happened, and the family was living 2 doors down from the Acre AC. So he heard it, and he said that it was like a typical riot, a lot of yelling. Every once in a while, he said he heard a loud bang, which he didn't know what it was at the time, but later on he surmised that it was gunshot.
Wow.
And he thought that most likely what happened was somebody had a gun or a shotgun, and every once in a while they fired in the air.
Wow.
Also, another mother, you remember the Nicholsons on Crown Street?
Yes, yep.
Gertrude, the mother, told me that after the riot, the Catholics went to all the auto body shops to find out the cars that were being repaired, and they were...
Those Catholics are smart. They're smart people.
They could identify the cars, they could identify the owner as a Klansman and a business owner. That's how they found out some people were Klansmen and
Yep.
boycotted
Yep.
their business.
I never heard of that one. That makes perfect sense, though, doesn't it? You know? Wow. Anybody else have any kind of family stories? Yes?
Two of my uncles were two of the Acre Boys that were in that riot, John Holleran and George Holleran. And they said on more than one occasion that the Klansmen would come out from Berlin and grab any Irish kid they could and beat them up.
Really?
So
Wow.
that's a first-hand account.
Wow. How about that? Anybody else? Now, do you want to say anything at all?
I received this letter from my mother's archives. Anyways, it's a 3-page thing. It goes through everything in detail.
And this is about the Lancaster Ballard Hill riot,
Yes.
right?
And my grandfather was Oren Thermal Collins, and he raised his family in Clinton. He had 12 children. And so I'm going to leave a copy, but I think all of you would love to read this. It goes into great detail.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you very much. We will make a copy of that. Anything else? No, yes.
I'd like to know about the name, you know, what clan I understand, but the Ku and the Klux part, did that mean anything, or?
Yes, it did, and I read that, but I'm not scholarly enough to explain. But I think Ku and Klux together meant some, I forgot, group type of thing. I don't even know what language. But by the way, I no need to mention where it came from. These robes out here are authentic Klan robes, but they were bought by a friend of ours at auction about 45 years ago in Tennessee. And so they are the real thing, which are kind of shocking when you look at them. But yes, they really are kind of scary.